Ask Mike, brought to you by the Stadium Shop on Razorback in Fayetteville.
Hey there and happy Monday. Welcome into another Ask Mike. Alyssa Orange alongside Mike Irwin and Courtney Mims doing a great job doing the show with you. Deserved vacation, so she is off today. Happy to be back in the chair, Mike. It's been a little bit, but let's jump right into these questions. Got a lot of good ones for you this week. And our first question is going to come from S. Giles, who says, last week you were warned everybody not to get too excited about the offense and too depressed about the defense based on what little we were seeing out of the first week of practice. Now it looks like you've got a different job to do. Convince all the offensive line haters that what happened in the scrimmage doesn't mean the offense is falling apart, right?
Well, you're never going to change all of that. I mean, you can warn people all you want. But again, what happened in that scrimmage was a good thing. And what happened is Sam Pittman, this is a classic case of, to me, the way people read articles on the internet. But too many of them just read the headlines and don't really get into what's said. So Sam Pittman comes out, first thing he says is pass blocking wasn't very good, quarterbacks had trouble early, didn't get a first down in the first two series, either with the one offense or the two offense. But then as the press conference goes on, he talks about what the offense did do. He gave us some statistics which showed some of the big plays. And then later on, the athletic department started releasing some video shots from that, and you saw some really good offensive plays. You saw Dominic Johnson run a 50-yard touchdown. It was amazing. This guy he and Rocket are big, like 240. And yet they can stop on a dime, shift left or right, and then squirt through a hole. And that's their value. Is usually it takes a smaller back like A.J. Green to do that. They can do that, and they're bigger. So there was some really good pass plays in there too, not just by KJ, but by the other two quarterbacks or other three quarterbacks. So overall, it was a good scrimmage. And what you don't want in any type of preseason scrimmage like that is you don't want one side to dominate. You kind of want a balance. But again, what we were showing in the first week was what? We were showing, it was an ideal situation for the offense because there's no offensive line. Quarterbacks can just sit there and look at their receivers. There's nobody in their way. And receivers just got to go get a little step on a guy and all of a sudden short pass and then complete it. Well, now all of a sudden you introduce a defensive line and you introduce a pass rush and you got people in the way, and it changed everything. And you and I talked about this. If your defense doesn't kind of win the first scrimmage, you got problems with your defense. That's almost always the way it goes. So if you looked at the whole thing, all of the stuff that was said about the scrimmage, and you looked at the stats, I don't see how you can come to any other conclusion that it was a good balanced scrimmage. You know, yes, the coaches are going to say, KJ came out and said, look, we got to work on this. Sam Pittman said, he talked about a lot about the penalties, and then people are going to start freaking out about penalties. But, I mean, this is what happens the first time you scrimmage in camp. These guys don't have referees out there throwing flags in practice every day, but suddenly you get out there in a game-like situation and throwing flags. It's not unusual that this would happen.
Yeah, you also got to think and take into consideration you want these things to be happening now and not week 1, week 2, week 3 of the season. So clean them up now, get better for tomorrow. Our next question is from H. McCamish, who asks, is it just me or did KJ seem like he was either depressed or maybe angry in the press conference after the scrimmage? Something seemed off. Is he off to a bad start?
Well, he's got pretty much a game face when he does press conference, so he's not going to come out grinning. But I agree. I noticed that. Other people in the media noticed that. We talked about it when it was over. He did seem to be a little peeved about what happened. Now, you got to understand how this works. So the scrimmage is just over. Sam Pittman comes in and he talks first. And the two players we're going to interview, or three, they kind of go in this little room. Sometimes they sit out and watch it. Sometimes they go in a little room. But you can hear what's going on in there. So KJ's in there, and he's listening to his head coach talk about the problems with the quarterbacks because they didn't have enough time to throw and what the defense did there. And so it's like he reacted the way some of the fans are reacting. I don't like this stuff. And then he got out there, and when it was his turn, he said, look, we got to do this, we got to do that. That's not a bad thing. To me, it's not a bad thing if your quarterback's ticked off and wants to do a lot better in the second scrimmage. And you and I both agree we think the offense will look better in the second scrimmage. That's usually what happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was a little bit ticked off, and I don't think it was a bad thing that he was.
Well, I think you guys still got to look at it. This is a KJ Jefferson who is back again to prove a point.
Yeah.
And he is here to play football. He is here to execute. And he said, we got to start faster. We started off a little slow. We got to be faster. It's going to be a focus this upcoming week at practice. And so for KJ to be angry or upset, it means he cares. Right? You do want to see some kind of emotion out of one of your players, specifically your quarterback, because he plays. If he was all like laissez-faire, acting like he didn't care, that might be more of a red flag to me than him maybe looking like he's angry. So,
and we always we don't want to blow smoke on this show.
Yeah.
And we don't do it with our pig trail product overall. And I will observe that he's been inconsistent some in the practices this year. What we saw today, which is one of the main things that he's needed to work on, and one of the things Enos is supposedly going to help him with, you get into those 3rd and 8 situations, he's got to complete a 12-yard pass. He tends to overthrow a guy wide open across the middle. All you got to do is, and it's over his head or goes down low, and he's done that some. Now, he's had days where he looked absolutely perfect. So there's still an inconsistency there with him. And along the lines of what you just said, you'd rather that be happening now and not as you approach the first game.
Yeah. Hog Redneck says, Coach Pittman keeps mentioning Jacoby Criswell like almost every day. Is he that good, or is this just being intentionally thrown out there to motivate Jefferson? Does he really need motivation?
I don't think that that's strictly just a deal to motivate him. I mean, I think he genuinely believes that Criswell, he said it too many times. He said it to me. He's walked up to other people and said it. I heard him talking to somebody else in the media a couple of days ago. He said, man, I can't believe what a strong arm he has. I was talking to Otis Kirk today, and he just said the backup quarterback situation is so much better than it's been, because it's not just Criswell. I mean, Malachi Singleton, the freshman, has impressed me with his passing from the first day. So the backup quarterback situation is better. I don't think KJ needs motivation. I don't think that's what's going on here. I think Sam Pittman genuinely likes what Criswell is doing, but he's not been perfect either. We've seen him look a little bit inconsistent, because that's just what happens when you play. The best player on the field is not going to make a play every time.
Yeah, for me, when I watch Criswell, the 15 minutes we were able to see him is making better, quicker decision making. Go through progressions a little bit quicker. There's a couple of those drills he just holds on to the ball a little too long, and then they call the play dead. So, everyone is improving, but I think the point that maybe Sam Pittman is trying to make here is, if KJ has to be out a game, or if something were to happen, because we've seen it 2 years in a row now, have faith in Jacoby Criswell as our backup QB. And I think that says a lot for a kid who transferred in from North Carolina because he didn't get a shot. Drake May took over there, and this is maybe his opportunity to show what he's got.
Right.
Mousetown wants to know, are we cursed? Oh, feels like it, doesn't it? Haven't played a game, and we've already lost a key player for the season. There's some sort of conspiracy going on. That's what I think.
Well, I don't believe in curses. I don't believe in conspiracies, not generally. We did finally get word today. It's not been an official release, and Sam Pittman hasn't commented on it, but we were told by somebody from the athletic department, yes, Sam Bakke is out for the year. And he handled it pretty good. Right after that, he had this Instagram photo of him sitting in a chair, and you could see his leg all wrapped up, and he said something about 2024, and he seemed to have a good attitude about it. What looks bad right now for him in that regard, next year at this time, he's a young guy that will redshirt and come back next year and hopefully be a big part of it. So injuries are a part of this. Sam Pittman said before all of this started that he regretted not having scrimmaged in the August camp of last year. Felt like it hurt their tackling early on, so he felt like he needed to do it. And yet when you do that. But injuries are so random. That might have happened no matter what you did. I've seen guys tear an ACL with nobody around them. So
yeah, guys have just tweaked an ankle doing drills or,
Right.
it's football. It just comes with the territory. But if there's any silver lining, in my opinion, if you're going to have an injury, that wide receiver room has got a lot of talent. That's nothing to worry about.
They've got as much talent as anybody.
Yeah. All right. LR Tackett wants to know, Mike Leach may be gone, but I've been told that Dan Enos will include some elements of the air raid offense in Arkansas's offense this season. Is that true? I would love to see that.
Yeah, it apparently is true because we've seen drills where they do that. And today was a good example. You were over with the tight ends, but you said, just shoot whatever you think. And I happened to be right there when they started this air raid drill. And if you're not familiar with it, what it is your quarterback is back kind of in a shotgun, and he's got one side loaded with people out there. You may have a flanker back off the line of scrimmage, a receiver off the line of scrimmage. You may have a tight end out there to block, a receiver to block. But in effect, what it is a running play that starts with a pass, because you very quickly get the ball to, say, a running back, like, it could be any of our running backs, but say Rocket. And you get it to him very quickly, and then he pauses for a second because he's watching how this blocking takes place with a cornerback, a linebacker, a safety over there, and you're looking for a little hole to squeeze through and squirt through. And in the first part of that, I would say the first 6 reps, the defense was just knocking the fool out of these guys. Nobody was going anywhere. It was pretty physical. Wham, wham, wham. And I'm saying, man, they're getting owned. And then on about the 6th or 7th rep, there was a little bitty hole, and here comes Rocket, and he's gone.
Yeah.
Because if you get through there, they've all come up to stop that. There's nobody to stop you. Mm-hmm. And then a little bit later, Dominic Johnson, right through there. And then A.J. Green. So again, what we're seeing is the back and forth that I talked about. For a while, you look like you're getting dominated, then you start getting it down. But I am excited about the element of that being there because it gives you just a different look than you've had before. And they're not going to line up and run the air raid like Mike Leach did. But just being able to do that, and if they get it down, that can be a game breaker or a play breaker. You can break a long run just by doing that.
Yeah. Mike Leach and Hal Mommy would be proud.
Yep.
All right, Pig's Feet says university ADs are seeking help from government officials concerning NIL. What do you think is going to happen with NIL? I feel like we answer an NIL question every week.
I keep saying that they're going to get it under control, and they think they will. But I don't like this idea that they think somebody else is going to solve this problem. The ADs, that's where it starts. They need to do something, and then the conference commissioners need to react to what they're saying. Look, I don't know why I can't get through to anybody on this. Every time I talk to somebody, they talk about lawsuits. Let me make this as clear as I know how to make it. There's an NIL rule that says, an NCAA rule that says you cannot use an NIL deal to recruit a player. Let's say I'm one of the coaches at Tennessee, because this is where it's the worst, because they started it. Their state legislature, Tennessee state legislature, passed a law that said NIL deals are perfectly legal. Well, nobody said they weren't legal. You can go back 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when buying players took place. Nobody said it was illegal to buy a player. They're not going to come and arrest you for doing it. It's not according to the rules of the organization you're a part of. So let me compare it to this. Let's say I go out and play in a golf tournament locally. It's a golf tournament, and there are flights, and I want to win a prize or whatever. And I go out there, and I'm out in the woods, and I can't see the green, and nobody's around, and I look around, I pick the golf ball up and go move it to where I can get to the green. Nobody sees me do it. Is that illegal? Am I going to be arrested? No, but it's against the rules. That's what we're talking about here. Every time I turn around, somebody's saying, well, no, it's legal now. You can do it. It never was illegal. It's not according to the rules. So NCAA, stop talking about this and start punishing teams that do it. Yes, Tennessee may sue you if Tennessee's involved. You're going to lose that lawsuit, Tennessee, because every organization I know of that exists with voluntary rules for membership have a right to enforce those rules unless there's something discriminatory about it or something. So this was always the rule. You can't buy players. It's cheating. And everyone says, well, now it's perfectly legal. It was always legal. It's just not according to the rules. So somebody's going to have to get the gumption to go ahead and enforce the rule and, yes, get sued and then beat whoever this is. The best way to handle this, though, to be honest with you, Alyssa, is for the various ADs to get together and go to one of the ADs of these schools like Tennessee or A&M and say, hey, bub, we're all a part of this organization and we don't like what's happening. You need to back off or we will back the conference in kicking you out. That's what needs to happen.
Kick butt.
Exactly.
Kick some butt.
Show some gumption. Don't sit around and wait for Congress to do something for you.
Nothing fires you up like NIL talk, and I love it. All right, Marty Burt's Proxy says fall camp, quote unquote, begins completely different now as opposed to several years back. I remember there was standards the players had to meet when reporting, such as a timed run. Which coaches were the strictest on that, and what if they weren't in great shape? Understandably, this is rarely an issue now. What's the question there, Mike?
Well, the question is, back before players worked out year-round.
That's what I was going to say. Summer workouts is really where all of this is pretty much.
Because now people don't report back out of shape.
No one is out of, yeah.
But in the old days, your scholarship wasn't in effect in the summer. So you either had to go home and live at home and do your room and board there, or you had to get a job or have enough money where you could maintain an apartment or whatever. And there were no coaching allowed, not even strength and conditioning, so you had to work out on your own. Okay, so when that happened, there were always guys that didn't do what they were supposed to do. So that's why they had a preseason conditioning test, and it was usually several days before fall camp starts. So then they'd run everybody through this, and usually it was the offensive or defensive lineman that failed the test. Let's say 8 guys failed the test.
Okay.
Well, then the coach would have a rule, okay, you got to do extra running until we get you back into shape. It helped the coaches understand who was in shape and who wasn't. Now, to be honest with you, I don't recall any differences in the standards. I don't ever recall a Razorback coach going, we don't care if that happens. They all pretty much enforced it. And I don't remember any that just wanted to kick a guy out of school so there were no real difference in the standards, except there was one incident that stands out. Oof. And that was back when a quarterback who had enrolled early in the spring and had gone through spring, should have still been a high school guy. So he goes through spring football. Now he doesn't go home that summer, but he apparently didn't do much else that summer either. So he shows up. Otis Kirk and I are standing there watching these preseason conditioning tests indoors, and this guy fails. And we're like, what? A quarterback fails the preseason? That's never happened before. So the first thing I do is go up to Joe Ferguson, who's the quarterback's coach, and he was a no-nonsense guy. And I said, can I talk to you about these? He said, absolutely. He was mad. And he got on camera and he said, a quarterback cannot fail the test. And the reason he can't fail the test is because if he fails the test, every other guy on the team has an excuse for failing the test. So we cannot allow this to happen. He was really going off on this kid. And I said something like, but Joe, he's a freshman, and, this is his first experience away from home. I mean, I can sort of see where this would happen. He said this was back during the Gulf War. He said there are young men younger than him over in the Middle East dying. He said, you want me to feel sorry for him because he didn't follow the directive that we gave? He was very, very adamant about that. So the kid apparently sees what Ferguson says in the interview. The next day in practice, there's a little hole, space between the chain link fence and what was then the indoor. He just goes through there and sneaks off, and he never comes back. He quits the team. Well, Houston Nutt got really mad. And he got mad at Ferguson. And I think that had a lot to do with why Ferguson left at the end of the year. So that was one incident where you had a coach that wanted to get really tough on a guy that failed it and a coach that wanted to be more lenient. But for the most part, they all were pretty much the same. It was pretty simple. You fail the test, we're going to run you until you're back in shape.
Makes sense. Okay. Fudge Scott wants to know, did you see the Johnny Manziel special? And if so, what did you think? Did he change some minds about the way he threw away his football career?
I didn't watch that, and I wouldn't have any interest in it because I don't have an interest in players that don't give to the game, they want to take from the game. Manziel, to me, was the perfect example of a guy enormously talented, but his attitude was, I want to know what football can do for me. And what it did for him is it made him famous, so therefore he could go out and party, not work hard, not study, not his game notes or any of that stuff. And on the college level, he got away with it. But what happened when he got into the NFL? It didn't work anymore, and so he's out of football. Now, look, that's his choice. I'm not criticizing him. Nobody makes you play football. When I did my student teaching back when I was planning to be a high school coach, there was a defensive tackle on that team, a high school team, that had a tremendous amount of talent, but he wasn't doing the job in practice. And the coaches told me to talk to him because I was only a few years older than him. They thought I could get through to him. And when I talked to him, he told me, I hate football. And I said, if you hate football, quit. And he said, oh, no, I don't want to be a quitter. And I said, look, football is a thing you do because you love. Nobody should make you do it. You should not be ashamed if you don't want to play football. Maybe you want to do something else. And that's still how I feel about Manziel or anybody else. If they don't want to put into the game what's necessary, they can do whatever they want. And he's out of the game, and if he's okay with it, and he changed some minds and made people think he's a good guy, that's fine with me. But here's what I don't like and what I do like. If you've got a committed player that instead of wanting to know what the game can do for him, it's what can I do for the game? Because what can I do for my team? Mm-hmm. If you've got a whole team full of guys like that, you can make stuff happen. And the reason I mention that is, and it still has to happen, but I think there may be something along those lines with this team. I don't know if you've noticed it, but I've noticed a difference with these guys. Mm-hmm. When you watch them in practice, there's not shoving and getting angry and cussing some guy out because he blocked you to the ground, or they're helping each other up. When they get into press conference, D-line's talking about the O-line, O-line's talking about the D-line, receivers are talking about cornerbacks. They don't dislike each other. They're all on the same team. Mm-hmm. And when you can get everybody like that and everybody working to give back to the game instead of taking from the game, you can, whatever talent level you have, you can raise that as a coach. It doesn't have to stay here. Mm-hmm. It can go up. And by the same token, if you got a bunch of Manziels on your team, you may have a talent level up here, but you play like, you know who does that? University of Texas, all the time. Every year, if you looked at the talent, how many 5 stars, how many 4 stars? They're up here. But what happens when the season is over? They're down here because they're taking away from the game, not giving back to the game. So I'm kind of excited about this team because I sense that they've got a bunch of guys that understand I'm going to work even harder than maybe I thought I was because this is really cool. Yeah. And they're talking to each other in the locker room, and maybe a guy's not performing very well, but they don't jump all over him. They're trying to encourage him. And then he's appreciative of that, and then he helps somebody else. And as a result, the whole thing goes up. Yeah. You don't have to be where somebody ranks you. The rankings have just come out now. The new AP poll is out. And everybody's mad because Arkansas is not in the AP poll. They're not in the coaches poll. Who cares about polls? Those people that vote on polls they're not inside these teams. They don't know what this balance is. Here's our talent level. Here's our camaraderie level. Can we raise it, or is it going down?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, only because reading the article today on ESPN about the AP Top 25 poll, you know, Georgia's #1, and that makes sense. They've won back-to-back national titles, so I'm not taking anything away from Georgia. But in the article itself, it says Georgia lost 25 players to the draft. They do not have Stetson Bennett anymore. But it said that Kirby Smart has been able to build a dynasty comparable to Nick Saban. Georgia's getting the Alabama treatment as of your name speaks for itself, not necessarily what you have on your roster. So to counter your point, no one has seen this Arkansas roster play yet, but there is a possibility that it will turn some heads 4 weeks into the season. We're going to have to see.
I'll say 2 things about polls. The coaches poll should be called the SID poll. Most coaches do not have time to pay attention to what's going on with every other school. They're practicing. They don't have time for that, so their SID gives them information or maybe even votes for them. So it's an SID poll, okay? That doesn't mean anything to me. And then you also, when you talk about AP, give me a break. Here's what the media does, and I talked about this last week. I cover one team, a team. I don't cover Tennessee or Vanderbilt or Florida. I don't know much about them right now. I will know about those teams if Arkansas plays them, and I study the week of a game. That's when I'll learn about those teams. In the preseason, I don't care. So how can I vote in a poll? What would I know? I would know about the team that I cover. So here's what they do.
This is you would.
They just look.
I think you would not vote for Texas. You would not vote for Texas A&M. It's a bias. Biases go in there.
There's some bias in there, but mostly it's just, you know what a lot of these media people do is they just look at last year and go, okay, they finished 5th. Okay, they're going to finish 5th in the West. They pay attention to maybe the top 2 or 3 teams in a division. And then they just ignore everybody else and put them back where they were, and they may be a completely different team this year.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. Oh, you lost me. I was focused in on that. Where are we? Okay. Oh, by the way, I don't think anyone thinks that Johnny Manziel's a good dude. Okay. I just feel
I didn't watch it. So.
No, I actually think it just solidified everyone's feelings. All right, Lanny says, I saw this thing on Facebook where the college football coaches were ranked on their ability to win in a fight. I know you're not a fan of Drinkwitz at Missouri, but they had him ranked pretty high. By the way, Sam Pittman on that list was number 2.
Yeah, we were talking initially in that press conference after press conference after the scrimmage. Scrimmage is still going on. We're all in there. We can hear it out there, but we know it's going to be a while. So there's about 20 media people in there. And somebody brought that up, and right off the bat, everybody was laughing how stupid it was.
Yeah.
But then what I realized was we were still ranking people. We're going, oh, he was too high. Why is Drinkwitz so high? And why is this guy so low? And somebody asked about Pittman, and I said, look, I like Sam, but are you serious that he was the second toughest coach in college football? He's 60 years old. Here's what I know about being 60. It's because I was 60 a long time ago.
Don't age yourself, Mike.
When you get there, you don't want to fight anybody. If I'm driving down the road and somebody does a road rage thing with me, they pull out in front of me, I'm like, okay, come on, I don't care. I'm not mad because I'm not whipping anybody. You just don't and I don't want to carry a gun, and that's the only other thing you could do. I got to carry a gun in case somebody tries to challenge me. So it's stupid to talk about coaches fighting each other because like they're going to have a fight club or something. It's not going to happen. However, all I would say about Pittman is, here's how I would rank those coaches. I would look at their age.
Okay.
And I would rank them based on age and then maybe go beyond that and go into their physicality or whatever. Drinkwitz he's about right because he's fairly young.
Who would be at the top? Would you put like Lane Kiffin up there?
Lane's in good shape.
He is.
So you take a young coach that's fit, and he looks like a reasonably good physical.
Yeah, maybe. I think Zach Arnett would win.
That's a good one.
Yes, so actually, I think he would win.
Physicality and age.
Okay.
I wouldn't be voting for Gundy's too old. Gundy was 40. He was a man and he was 40 20 years ago. Now he's a man and he's 60. So come on, it's stupid.
And people think you're mad all the time. Dude's mad.
Dude's mad.
You're like a pacifist. No fighting.
No, I'm not fighting anybody. I'm too old.
All right, we got one more here. Eddie Lynn asked, what's the biggest difference between preseason practices today and when you first started like 100 years ago?
Okay, that's very funny. Now, in the interest of accuracy or revealing things, I know this guy, okay?
Okay, so Eddie's just joking with you here?
Well, he does that to me all the time, and he's a good friend, but he asks good questions. And I tell him, you can ask questions. Just because you know me doesn't disqualify you from asking questions.
Okay.
And he and I have talked about this before, as a matter of fact, about the differences now in what's now called preseason camp. And the biggest single difference is two-a-days, two-a-days. What used to happen was two-a-days was supposed to be a thing that took you from being a weenie guy that didn't do all you were supposed to do in the summer and get you ready to play again. So we're going to work you out twice a day in the heat, and we're not going to give you we're going to give you salt tablets and a lot of crazy stuff. And they were doing absolutely the worst thing they could have done because doctors were standing up and going, aha, will you listen to me? This is stupid. And nobody was paying any attention. This is one of the few things the NCAA has done over the years that was good because they stepped in with good medical evidence and said, this is idiotic. Players were dying in August.
Yeah.
And here's what they discovered from these doctors. The human body is an amazing thing. We get up every day and what do you think sleep is for? Sleep is where your body repairs itself.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're going through two-a-days and you go through this hot, humid workout, if you don't work out again until the next day, your body's had the rest of the day, because if you get in under the air conditioner and cool off and then you go to sleep at night, you have a chance to repair everything. But if you went back out in the afternoon and did it again, there wouldn't be enough time. So what was happening was it was a cumulative effect. The second day, you weren't quite as good condition as you were in the first. Third day, you're really getting behind. Fourth day, you got a problem. I remember when they used to work out on the game field at Razorback Stadium. It was AstroTurf, which makes it even worse because that AstroTurf, you put a thermometer above there.
It radiates heat back up.
It would be like 115 degrees. Well, that was where your feet were. It didn't do that to your upper body, but your feet would be hot.
I mean, if you're playing football, you're down on the ground a lot.
And they used to have these golf carts with stretchers on them.
Oh my gosh.
And when a player, what you ended up with is a lot of pulled muscles, a lot of cramping. And so they'd load these guys up on these golf carts and they'd go out the stadium gate and go up Razorback Road up to the infirmary, which was about a block and a half away. And you just see these guys being carted off all the time. How many guys did you see carted off today?
Zero.
Nobody.
We haven't seen anyone carted off for a week and a half.
That's right. But in those days, it happened all the time. And it was because this two-a-day stuff was idiotic. So the NCAA kind of broke it in. They said, well, you're only going to be allowed to do it 3 times or 4 times, and then you got to cut it back. And they finally succeeded over about 2 or 3 years just passing a rule against it. And I remember when that happened. There were all these old school guys going, they're turning football players into sissies. And coaches didn't even like it. But when they saw the results of it, which it's not bad to get back inside under the air conditioner after a hot workout because you're allowing think about this. If you were driving your car around and you let the oil run down low, would it make your car better if we're going to even pour some more oil out of it and run it without more oil? No, you'd burn your engine up eventually. So it's not sissy-like to allow your body to take over and repair the damage that was done. And so that's the biggest difference. And then the other difference is what we've already talked about, which was players in the old days did not start August camp in the kind of shape that they're in right now. So for all of you old school guys like me, old school, good old days weren't always the good old days. There were things that were going on back then that weren't good. And players dying in practice, and every year there'd be 3 or 4 of them, sometimes it was high school level. And they pretty much eliminated that because they're smarter.
And I think too, like recovery and rehab is so much more important, just like practice is. We are seeing guys who did play in the good old days with really bad body issues as they got older. And we're seeing less and less of that because of the science and the medicine behind body recovery for athletes. So it really is important.
Yeah, I would like to think that 20 or 30 years from now, we're not going to see all the Alzheimer's cases we see with athletes now because they're coming up with better helmets. And now we see players with those things over their helmet. They've got to
every day at practice.
They've got to eventually make that in a game because what that does is it allows the impact when you hit somebody's helmet. It allows some space and it slows it down just enough that you don't get that concussion effect. So they're doing a lot of things now that long term will be better off. And nobody wants to see a 50-year-old, nobody wants to see what Earl Campbell looks like today. The guy can barely walk. It's tragic. I loved him as a player. One of the few
really?
Yes, one of the few long.
Heard it here first.
He was a longhorn, but you had to respect that dude. But he just wrecked his body. And today they won't allow somebody to do that. They're not going to line a player up and run him 60 times in a football game or whatever. Just bam, 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 bam. And 60 is an exaggeration, but they're just smarter about the way they deal with athletes. And as a result, they can live a normal life instead of, 10 years after your career is over, you're already hobbled and you can't get around anymore. Nobody wants that.
Also want to set the record straight. Started like 100 years ago. Half that. 50 years. 50 years
covering
ago.
Football, covering sports now, not the Razorbacks is 47.
47, close enough to 50.
I worked at 3 different television stations in the first 3 years. Just went jump, jump, jump because I was looking for the right place.
And then you found it. Here we
are.
For
me, it was.
Here we are 47 years later. That's going to do it for this week's Ask Mike. Again, if you have a question for Mike, head on over to hogville.net or his Facebook, Twitter pages. You can ask there as well. Mike, great set of questions.
Okay.
We'll see you next week.